The CIA spent $20 million teaching psychics to spy on the Soviet Union. They built a gun that gives you a heart attack and leaves zero evidence. And they once tried to kill Fidel Castro with an exploding seashell. Today, we're going through 15 declassified CIA secrets that sound like fiction, but aren't. Let's go. Operation Acoustic. Number 1, 1963. The CIA's Office of Technical Services gets an idea that everyone in the room should have laughed at immediately. Put a microphone inside a cat, train the cat to walk towards specific sounds, release it near Soviet officials, and maybe, it will sit near enough to a park bench conversation to record state secrets. They spent 5 years on this. 5 years. Surgeons implanted a transmitter at the base of the cat's skull, ran a thin wire antenna through its fur, and stitched a microphone into its ear canal. The total cost was somewhere around $20 million in today's money. First field test. They drive the cat to a park bench near the Soviet embassy and release it. The cat walks directly into traffic and gets hit by a taxi. Never even made it to the bench. The entire program was cancelled shortly after. Project Stargate. Number 2, the CIA spent $20 million to see if psychics could spy on the Soviet Union from a room in Maryland. This is not a joke. The program was called Stargate. The psychics were called remote viewers. Their job was to sit in a dark room, go into a trance, and describe Soviet military bases in their mind. One remote viewer said he could see a massive crane being built at a secret Soviet shipyard. Another described an entire submarine prototype that he had never seen and had no access to intelligence on. The CIA was so intrigued, they kept Stargate running for over 20 years. The program ended in 1995. The final report said, and then I quote more or less, "The information produced was vague and of no practical value. $20 million, 20 years. Vague and of no practical value." That is a direct quote from a government report that admitted they paid people to stare at walls for 2 decades. Bat bombs. Number 3, World War II. A dental surgeon named Lytle Adams writes a letter to the White House. His idea? Strap tiny incendiary bombs to bats, drop them over Japanese cities at dawn, and let the bats roost in the wooden eaves of buildings before the explosives detonate. The military actually built this. They developed a 1-ounce napalm capsule small enough for a bat to carry. They tested it. And during one test at the Carlsbad Army Airfield in New Mexico, I need you to hear this, the armed bats accidentally escaped. The bats flew into the base's own fuel storage tanks and control tower. They burned down an entire U.S. military installation with bats on accident. The program was eventually scrapped because the atomic bomb was finished first. But for a brief, glorious moment, the United States military's most dangerous enemy was its own Bat Air Force. Heart attack gun. Number 4, 1975, a Senate hearing, CIA director. William Colby reaches into a briefcase and pulls out a small, sleek pistol. He explains to the room of senators that this weapon fires a dart made of frozen shellfish toxin. The dart enters the target's bloodstream, the ice melts, the toxin does its work, and the victim dies of what looks exactly like a heart attack. The entry wound, a tiny red dot, undetectable. This was a real weapon, real research, real shellfish toxin. The CIA had developed an untraceable assassination tool and brought it to Capitol Hill just to prove it existed. The senators were understandably horrified. The gun was never used in an actual operation, as far as we know, but the fact that it existed, that it was built, that someone's job was heart attack gun designer, tells you everything about the Cold War. Operation Midnight Climax. Number 5. This one is genuinely hard to explain without sounding like I'm making it up. In the 1950s and 60s, the CIA was desperate to understand mind control. So they opened brothels. In San Francisco and New York City, the agency rented apartments, hired prostitutes, and lured unsuspecting men inside. Then they drugged the men with LSD, without their knowledge or consent, and watched from behind one-way mirrors to see what happened. The operation was called Midnight Climax. The CIA officer running it was a man named George White, a federal narcotics agent who apparently had zero moral qualms about any of this. He kept detailed logs, some of which were later declassified. His notes include observations like, and I'm paraphrasing, subject became extremely talkative after dose, revealed sensitive information. Sir, you gave a stranger LSD in a brothel you built. Of course he became talkative. The operation ran for over a decade. When the CIA director finally found out about it years later, his reported reaction was to deplore it. A strong word from a man whose agency built a heart attack gun. Exploding cigar. Number 6, Fidel Castro. The CIA tried to kill him so many times they eventually lost count. The official number is somewhere over 600 attempts, and the list of methods reads like a rejected script from a cartoon. The exploding cigar, designed and built. A tiny explosive charge inside a cigar. Castro lights it. Boom. The plan was abandoned before it reached him. Not because anyone decided it was insane, because the logistics of getting the exact cigar into his exact mouth proved too complicated. But here's the thing. And this is what makes the CIA's Castro file so perfect. The exploding cigar wasn't even close to the weirdest idea on the list. We're just getting started. Spy-pigeons. Number 7. Before satellites and drones, the CIA had a simpler solution for aerial surveillance. Pigeons. With cameras strapped to their chests, the Office of Research and Development built a tiny automatic camera that weighed less than a pigeon could comfortably carry. They trained pigeons to fly specific routes over sensitive sites in the Soviet Union. The pigeon flies. The camera clicks. The pigeon comes home. You now have photos of a Soviet missile base taken by a bird. The CIA only declassified this program in 2019. For decades, if you saw a pigeon acting a little too interested in government buildings, you were not crazy. You just had the wrong security clearance. MKUltra. Number 8. MKUltra. The biggest, darkest, most genuinely disturbing program on this list. For over 20 years, from 1953 into the early 1970s, the CIA ran a massive illegal mind control project on American soil. They dosed unwitting citizens with LSD, patients in psychiatric hospitals, prisoners, random members of the public, often without any medical supervision, often with devastating consequences. The program also tested hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and chemical agents. A new batch of over 1,200 declassified documents was released by the National Security Archive in late 2024, and congressional hearings on MKUltra were held as recently as June 2026. The full scope of what happened is still coming out. The CIA's official position today, the program was a mistake. A terrible, illegal, indefensible mistake. But they did it for 2 decades, and they hid it until investigative journalists and Senate committees forced it into the light. Operation Northwoods. Number 9, 1962. The Joint Chiefs of Staff draft a plan so extreme that President Kennedy himself rejected it. Operation Northwoods. The idea was to stage fake terror attacks on American soil, hijackings, bombings, even shooting down a passenger plane, and blame them on Cuba. The goal? Manufacture public support for a war with Castro. The Pentagon literally proposed faking the deaths of American citizens to justify an invasion. The documents were declassified in 1997, 35 years after the fact. When you read them today, the thing that hits you is how detailed they are. Specific cities, specific targets, specific fake evidence they planned to plant. This wasn't a napkin sketch. This was a fully developed military proposal signed by the highest-ranking officers in America. Kennedy said no, and that single no might be the most important thing he ever did. The Berlin Tunnel. Number 10. 1954, the CIA and Britain's MI6 dig a 1,500-foot tunnel directly under the Soviet sector of Berlin, straight into the main Soviet telephone cable hub. For nearly a year, American and British intelligence listened to every call Soviet commanders made in East Berlin. The tunnel was so ambitious, it produced 50,000 reels of tape. Every conversation about troop movements, every internal memo, every piece of gossip recorded and transcribed by a team working underground in a concrete bunker disguised as a radar station above it. The Soviets discovered it in 1956. They held a press conference and invited the world to tour the American spy tunnel like it was a museum exhibit. But here's the twist. A Soviet mole named George Blake had told Moscow about the tunnel before it was even finished. The Soviets let it operate for 11 months to protect their source. The CIA spent millions to eavesdrop on conversations the Soviets knew were being recorded the entire time. If you want more history where the truth is weirder than anything you could make up, hit subscribe, because we've barely started. Next time we're opening the FBI's declassified files, and trust me, J. Edgar Hoover's memo collection makes the CIA look like they had impulse control. I'll see you in the next one.